So, the 2024 UK election is set to take place on the 4th of July. So let's take a look at what the election results could mean for you and how they could potentially affect your money. Elections can bring about significant changes, and it's crucial to understand how those changes could affect your financial situation. So let's dive straight in. So as an election overview, Labour has slowly begun to gain favour over the Conservatives over the last 2 years. As of the 21st of June, Labour sits at 41% and the Conservatives at 21%, down over 40% since their peak during 2020. Now you can see Reform UK have started to emerge since the beginning of 2024. They could potentially overtake the Conservatives. I've seen estimates that say they will overtake the Conservatives, but they're still lagging behind currently, and the rest of the parties don't look set to make any huge waves in this upcoming election. Okay, so once again, it's Labour versus Conservatives. Now, historically, the working class tend to lean towards Labour, and the wealthy in large part tend to vote for the Conservatives. So let's break down some of their policies and see which ones are better for your wallet. Now, the central battleground for this election is taxes. Everyone's worried they'll be paying more tax. Now, generally, Labour proposes higher tax rates on high earners to fund public services, and the Conservatives tend to like keeping income tax low to try and stimulate economic growth. But this year, both parties have said that they'd freeze taxes. But the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, have published research that says tax rises are likely over the next 5 years, and that both parties know this, which is why they haven't been able to present any clear-cut policies within their manifestos. Tax specialists have backed the IFS research, and they've said that over the next 5 years we'll end up paying more tax because the country is essentially, the UK is essentially broke and severely in debt. So to pay off that debt or to continue spending as much as we do on public services, we'll end up paying more taxes. Both parties would rather increase taxes than cut spending or increase borrowing, essentially increase the level of debt they have. But then again, neither manifesto makes clear what they would do in which situation, considering the NHS is already underfunded, the transport infrastructure is lagging behind, and schools don't have enough teachers. I say it's likely we will see tax rises regardless of which party ends up winning. In a recent news story, Labour has actually drafted options for wealth taxes to unlock funding for public services. Now, the UK is already quite a high tax nation. We already pay relatively high income tax, VAT, on anything we purchase. For example, if you were to purchase a MacBook in the US, it would be $999, whereas in the UK, it would also be £999. And even though those conversion rates don't match, that's another tax the UK pays, or the UK consumers pay, called VAT. Now, Labour drafting these options has meant that wealthy individuals and wealthy foreigners have started stepping up plans to leave the UK. Between 2017 and 2023, 16,500 millionaires migrated from the UK, and provisional estimates for 2024 say a further 9,000 millionaires are going to follow in their steps. The UK just isn't a tax efficient system for them. The Conservatives have promised to cut national insurance by 2%, and they say they plan on abolishing national insurance completely, although I'm not entirely sure how that would work. And they also have tax freezes at the centre of their whole election manifesto. Now, interestingly, I read that Labour is the party that's seen as the most well equipped to deal with the cost of living crisis, but also that 70% of people couldn't name one policy that Labour have promised that would help them to tackle the cost of living crisis. Minimum wage. Labour proposes larger increases in minimum wage, whereas Conservatives tend to like a more moderate approach to the increases that they offer. Now, there's pros and cons to both. You might think minimum wage increases is definitely the way to go. Employees have more money, which is great. But if you think about it from the point of view of a family who runs a flower shop, if minimum wage increases a significant amount, then they can no longer afford to pay their employees, and ultimately they'll be run out of business, and their market share will be eaten up by a big corporation. Large increases in minimum wage don't affect large corporations or companies. They can take the deficit and budget it into their accounts. So while large increases in minimum wage mean more money in your pocket as an employee, down the line, as corporations start to eat up all the market share of individual and small businesses, it could mean you end up paying through the nose for the items that were previously cheaper, because now the corporation has a monopoly and they can set the market price at whatever they want. There's a fine-tuned balancing act. I personally think there should be a tiered system for minimum wage, depending on a bunch of different factors. The NHS, this is a big one. The National Health Service has seen a steady decline over the last couple of years, and no doubt that's been exacerbated by COVID. To remedy this, now I'm going to read straight from the party manifestos. The Conservatives have said they'd recruit 92,000 more nurses and 28,000 more doctors. Labour, on the other hand, says they'll add 40,000 more appointments every week and add 8,500 new mental health staff to the NHS. I don't know where those numbers are going to come from. I don't think that either party has addressed the root cause of the issues the NHS is currently undergoing. They seem to have just thrown out large numbers that sound really good on paper. From the analysis that I've been able to do, I don't see how anyone would want to spend so long becoming a healthcare professional if the NHS salary bands remain as they are. I didn't see how someone can survive on those. Both parties have just made claims that they would hire more nurses, hire more doctors, unlock more appointments. I don't have any idea how it will be actioned, where those doctors are going to come from, where those nurses are going to come from. My personal belief is that the NHS is gradually being defunded and run into the ground so that the general public begins to think that privatizing the NHS is the only best way forward. Housing. Now, I've been researching the UK housing market for a while now, and I'll be making an entire video on the current ongoing housing crisis. Labour plans on building 1.5 million new homes, and the Conservatives have said they'll devise plans that will help people onto the housing ladder, such as 5% deposits and the such. Now, if we take a look historically, those Labour house building targets won't be reached. We've been promised a certain number of houses multiple times, and those targets have never been met. And that's simply because the UK has some of the worst planning permission infrastructure I have ever come across. The red tape to build a development of houses is so severe and takes such a long bureaucratic process that it's unbelievable. And with the Conservatives offering the 5% deposits I think are only one prong of the issue. If you do end up putting down a 5% deposit, you will end up paying more over the length of your mortgage through variable interest rates or higher interest rates. Also, I feel as though the root cause of the issue isn't being addressed. Again, I feel intentionally. Over 100 MPs, members of parliament, are landlords, and they declared that they earn at least £10,000 a year each from rental income. They said they earn at least, so that means that 10,000 is on the lower end, which raises the question, why make something affordable if it benefits you directly? I think there's a clear conflict of interest there. It would seem as though it's in their best interest to manipulate the market and put forth policies that make it more and more difficult for more affordable housing to be built. From the research and analysis I've been able to do, I found that any new homes or developments that are built are just snapped up by investors, often at a premium, and rented out or sit empty, essentially as an incredibly lucrative investment account, because housing has seen such incredible gains over a couple of years, over the last couple of decades, I would say. That's another prong of the issue. As long as housing is seen as an investment, everyone involved within housing builders, house owners, the government, members of parliament, they'll want to increase their income that they can generate from their investment. To combat this, other countries have implemented waiting periods for foreign investment or buy-to-let mortgages on new build properties to try and help people get onto their property ladder. Canada, for example, has a 2-year ban on any foreign investment on new developments. Canada's been experiencing their own housing crisis, so that's a completely separate issue. But the UK hasn't implemented any of these policies. Not only would it be difficult to prove where the investment is coming from, but also I don't think housing is going to be affordable in the UK for a long, long time. I think there are too many forces that want property prices to keep going upwards. A housing market looks set to get to the point where large corporations will continue buying as much private real estate as possible and offering it as rentals on the private market as part of their own portfolio. Lloyds have already put this plan into action with their branch of Citra Living. And honestly, I don't think, regardless of who wins, Labour or Conservative, I don't think any party is going to change the fact that housing is seen as an investment. Elections can affect your money in so many different ways. We covered 3 that can affect your personal finances. Elections can create economic uncertainty. During the build-up to an election, the housing market slows down. The stock market becomes more volatile. In the UK's case, Bloomberg hedge fund analysts have reported that they're bullish on the UK economy, which means they're optimistic that the UK will bounce back and potentially have a stronger pound, with the economic landscape looking much more calm post-election. Now, I'll be honest, doing this research wasn't straightforward. It's really hard to find concrete policies and manifestos that parties have published. Another thing is that manifestos are just words. They're just promises made by different parties, and they aren't confirmed actionable processes put into any action. People tend to think that what a party says it will do is exactly what it will do, which isn't the case. And honestly, I mean, historically we've seen so many missed targets, so many policies that have been reviewed and revised end up completely changing from the initial promise that they made in the run-up to an election. That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. Well, that's all for this video. I hope this video was useful. If it was, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.